Picture this: someone who promised to love you, who swore they'd be there through everything, ends up in someone else's arms. And the first question that comes to mind is always the same: how could they? But psychologists have spent decades studying infidelity not as a moral label, but as a behavior with its own internal logic. And that logic turns out to be far more complicated than a bad person did a bad thing. Today, we're breaking down 8 psychological reasons why people cheat, drawing on research from psychologists, anthropologists, and sex researchers who've spent years studying this subject, not to excuse infidelity, but to understand its mechanics. Because understanding is the first step toward either rebuilding a relationship or consciously letting it go. One thing worth saying up front: none of the explanations below are excuses. Psychology doesn't forgive. It describes patterns. And when we see the same patterns show up again and again across different cultures and decades of research, one thing becomes clear: infidelity is rarely random. Most often, it's the final point in a long chain of events, decisions, and unspoken needs that built up for months, sometimes years, before that one moment. Reason 1: emotional starvation. Therapist Esther Perel, author of The State of Affairs, spent years counseling couples after infidelity and found something unexpected. Most people who cheat aren't looking for a new partner. They're looking for a lost part of themselves. Perel puts it this way: an affair is often less about wanting someone else and more about wanting to feel like a certain version of yourself again. When a relationship becomes routine, when partners turn into roommates coordinating schedules instead of lovers who actually see each other, an emotional vacuum forms. And that vacuum isn't always filled by sex. Often it's about attention, the feeling of being seen, heard, found interesting. Perel's research shows that many people describe their affair not as running away from their partner, but as running away from who they'd become inside that relationship. Reason 2: attachment style. This is where attachment theory comes in. First developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by psychologists Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver in their research on adult romantic relationships. They showed that the way we build closeness as adults is largely shaped in childhood, through our early relationships with caregivers. People with an anxious attachment style often fear abandonment so intensely that they subconsciously seek proof of their own worth elsewhere, almost testing whether they're still desirable to someone. People with an avoidance style, on the other hand, feel uncomfortable with too much closeness and may use an affair as a way to create distance when a partner gets too close. Research published in the Journal of Sex Research confirms that people with insecure attachment styles report significantly higher rates of infidelity than those with secure attachment. Reason 3: the need for validation. Low self-esteem is another factor psychologists link to infidelity, though the cause and effect runs both ways. On one hand, someone who doesn't feel valuable may seek external validation through the attention of a new person. Every compliment, every glance becomes almost like a dose that temporarily quiets an inner voice of doubt. Psychologist Terri Orbuch, who led the longest-running marriage study in the U.S. at the University of Michigan for over 25 years, found that people who feel undervalued at home are significantly more likely to seek recognition outside the relationship. In other words, the affair here isn't really about the partner. It's about a deep personal insecurity that existed long before that person ever entered the picture. Reason 4: biology and evolutionary wiring. Now let's look at this from another angle. Evolutionary psychology. Researcher David Buss, in his book The Dangerous Passion, examined why jealousy and infidelity show up so consistently across every culture and era. His argument: from an evolutionary standpoint, men and women historically faced different reproductive pressures, which he theorizes shaped different mating strategies over time. Anthropologist Helen Fisher, who studied the neurochemistry of love, adds another layer. Our brains release dopamine in response to novelty. In long-term relationships, that dopamine hit naturally fades. A partner becomes familiar, predictable, and predictability, unfortunately, doesn't activate the brain's reward centers the way something new does. This isn't a justification, just an explanation for why the pull of novelty is a real neurobiological mechanism, not simply a character flaw. Reason 5, opportunity and anonymity. Sociologist Eric Anderson, who studied infidelity culture among young adults, pointed to a simple but important factor: opportunity. People who travel frequently for work, operate in highly anonymous environments, or have more unsupervised free time report higher rates of infidelity. This lines up with research showing that infidelity isn't always the result of long simmering dissatisfaction. Sometimes it's an impulsive decision. In a moment when the usual social checks, familiar faces around, shared routines, fear of being caught, temporarily disappear. Psychologists call this situational infidelity, as opposed to chronic infidelity, which is rooted in personality. Reason 6, revenge and unresolved anger. Sometimes an affair isn't about seeking closeness at all. It's about inflicting pain. Clinical psychologist Shirley Glass, one of the leading researchers on infidelity, described in her book Not Just Friends Get Weak cases where a partner cheats consciously, almost demonstratively, as a form of revenge for a real or perceived betrayal, humiliation, or years of accumulated resentment. In these cases, infidelity functions almost like a cry for help, a way to make a partner feel the same pain the cheating partner has been carrying. It's one of the most destructive motives because it rarely resolves the original problem. It just adds a new wound on top of an existing one. Reason 7, personality traits. Finally, personality research shows certain traits correlate with a higher likelihood of infidelity. Psychologists studying the dark triad of personality, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy find that people who score higher on these traits are more likely to engage in extramarital relationships. The reasoning is straightforward. These traits come with lower empathy, a stronger need for admiration, and a weaker internal brake on breaking promises. But it's important not to conflate this with the earlier reasons. Not every affair is a sign of narcissism, and not every narcissist cheats. It's just one risk factor among many. Reason 8, chronic dissatisfaction and conflict avoidance. The final factor is arguably the most underrated. Psychologist John Gottman, who spent decades studying couples at his Love Lab in Seattle, found that many couples live for years with unresolved conflicts neither partner dares to bring into the open. Instead of a conversation, there's silence. Instead of conflict, there's distance, one that slowly becomes normal. Gottman calls this parallel lives, partners physically together but emotionally living in separate worlds. When someone spends years not saying, "I'm hurting," or "I need something more," that dissatisfaction doesn't just disappear, it looks for another outlet. In these cases, infidelity isn't an impulse. It's the slow result of accumulated silence that no one ever worked up the nerve to break. What to do with this? Understanding. These reasons isn't a way to excuse the pain felt by the person who was cheated on. It's more of a tool. If an affair grew out of emotional starvation or an attachment wound, a relationship can sometimes be rebuilt through deeper work on intimacy. But if it's a repeating pattern rooted in personality traits or a conscious behavioral choice, that's a different conversation, and maybe a conversation about whether to stay at all. Psychologists agree on one thing. Infidelity is almost never about a single moment of weakness. It's a symptom of something deeper that had been building long before the act itself. And that's exactly why understanding the reasons isn't about finding excuses. It's about finding honesty with yourself, with your relationship, and with what you actually need from intimacy. If you recognize your own story in any of this, whether from the side of the one who cheated or the one who was cheated on, it's worth remembering that none of these mechanisms are a life sentence. Understanding why something happened doesn't mean it had to happen. People with anxious attachment aren't doomed to cheat. Couples who've stayed silent for years can learn to talk. And even the deepest personality trait doesn't excuse a choice, because it's always still a choice. What's really worth taking away from all of this is that infidelity starts long before the physical or emotional betrayal itself. It starts in small moments, when a partner shares something and isn't really heard, when someone asks for more attention and gets silence instead, when an inner voice says something is missing and the person is too afraid to even admit it to themselves. It's in those quiet, everyday moments that everything that eventually grows into something much bigger first takes root. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications.